I was still in New York, and I essentially, the law firm didn't know what I was doing. So I had this double life,
Right.
where I was like treating my law job, this very, prestigious law job, like I was like a bartender gig, writing movies at the same time. And eventually I couldn't keep all the balls up in the air. The law firm said, you know what, we want you to go, we got a great treat for you. We're going to send you back to law school at night to get your master's in tax law. I'm like, that's fantastic. And I didn't tell them now I had 2 jobs and I was going to school at night.
Yeah, and you couldn't turn down their offer.
I couldn't tell them.
Wow.
And eventually I couldn't do it anymore. I was getting too much work at the law firm. I had school, screenplays, deadlines. I just finally kind of went into work one day and just kind of said, I no mas.
You're listening to Screenwriters Need to Hear This with Michael Jamin.
Hey everyone, this is Michael Jamin. Welcome back to another episode of Screenwriters Need to Hear This. My next guest is a great dude and one of the first dudes I've ever worked with in Hollywood as a TV writer, Mr. Stephen Engel, and his credits are, well, geez, man, he's got some fantastic credits. Dream On, which you ran. He was the showrunner of Dream On. We're going to talk about that because that was one of my favorite shows. Mad About You, All Right Already, which you created, right? You co-created it, or you created
I didn't create it. I ran it though. I supervised and executive produced the pilot, and then co-ran the series.
All right. Okay. Just Shoot Me, which we worked on together. Work With Me, wait, did you create?
That I created.
Was it Work With Me or Work With Me?
It was Work With Me. It was Work With Me. It was Work With Me.
Inside Schwartz, which I know you created. I remember I helped out for a day or a day and a half.
Yeah.
I think I gave you 3 hours worth of work in a day and a half.
It was very appreciated.
The Big House.
Yeah.
Quintuplets, The War at Home, Big Bang Theory, Ant Farm, Mighty Med, Sigmund and the Sea Monsters.
Yeah.
You got a lot of credits, dude.
I've been around.
You've been around. Tell me, but let's first begin with the beginning.
Okay.
Because I know you started as a lawyer.
That is correct.
And how long were you lawyering?
It felt like forever, but it was really only like 3 years, maybe.
And this is in New York, right out of law school.
Yeah, I went to law school, which was a very big mistake. I knew within a month that I'd made a terrible mistake, maybe sooner. But
why?
I just got there. I went straight from college, really, because I didn't know what else to do.
Uh-huh.
And back then, I didn't know. I lived in New York. I grew up in, a town away from you.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what the TV business was. I didn't know anything about screenwriting, and so I was good at going to school. So I went to law school. I applied. I got into a good law school. I went, and I just got there, and it was just stultifying, if that's a word. It was.
But I thought what I've heard is that law school is interesting. It's being a lawyer that's not fun.
No, I had all through college, I didn't really do a lot of creative writing. I didn't take creative writing courses, but I was actually looking back at I found some of my old economics papers, and I reread them, and I wrote them as if they were Woody Allen vignettes for the they were all they had these big tee-ups that were comedic, and then I would get into the substance, but it was with examples that were funny,
right?
And then I would sort of sum them up at the end, and my professor would always be like, thank you. After reading 25 papers, it was a pleasure to read something that was entertaining.
Oh, that's nice.
But when you get to law school, there was no leeway for that. It was everything was just completely dry. So intellectually it was kind of interesting, but it was very creatively stifling.
But as a kid, you didn't do any creative, you were in the theater, you weren't doing anything like that?
No, not really. I mean, I was interested in comedy. If I look backwards, I could see all of these things that I did. I did a TV show in college, a game show that I wrote and hosted.
Uh-huh.
I taught a class on 20th century humor and satire. So all of the things were there. In retrospect, you could see a path that was leading to writing comedy, but I didn't know that it was a job.
Right.
And it wasn't really until law school that I started exploring doing comedy. I started doing stand-up a little bit.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But then how did you know, how did you realize it was a job? At what point?
I I was at the time I had a friend who was doing in college from college who was doing stand up also. We had our girlfriends were best friends. And he was a year behind me. He was applied to law school, didn't go, and decided he wanted to try to like break into writing. And we were both doing stand up, and then we just started talking and said we should write a movie.
Okay.
Like, okay. So we kind of got together one weekend. He was living in LA. I was in NYU Law School. I interviewed for law firms in California so they would fly me out so that we could get together and talk about movie ideas.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So we came up with an idea. We started writing separately, and we knew nothing. We literally knew nothing about writing screenplays. We just had seen movies and, movies. And so we started writing this idea that we thought was really great. We had about 50 pages that we thought were fantastic, so we ended up through a friend of a friend had lunch with a guy who was a professional screenwriter, and he told us, you should read this book, Screenplay by Sid Field, which everyone should read, they're trying to write. So we read this book and we're like, oh no,
You're doing it wrong.
We don't know anything. And we realized that the 50 pages that we wrote that we thought were gold should have been like 5 pages.
Right.
Nothing was happening. It was just like character development, joke, funny scenes. So we took those 50 pages, compressed them down to 5 pages, and came up with a proper structure. And then we were writing this whole movie. He was pursuing his career and I was a lawyer. Guy's name, by the way, is Rob Burnett, who we were writing partners, and he went on to great success at David Letterman. And
he was executive producer of but was he the head writer or executive producer?
Head writer, executive producer, and basically president of Worldwide Pants.
Right.
So and we wrote like 5 movies together for various studios. And ultimately I got a job on Dream On and moved out to LA to write by myself because he was writing at Letterman by himself. And we sort of, at that point, we didn't need to collaborate because we both had individual careers.
You skipped a step. How did you get hired on Dream On?
Okay, so he and I were writing this movie. I got a law job when I graduated. I worked there for the summer. They offered me a job when I graduated. And I did the first risky thing I'd ever done in my life. I had never done anything remotely rebellious. And I decided that I was going to take probably the first gap year that anyone ever took.
Oh, wow.
I asked the firm if I could defer my job for a year because I was trying to write. They're like, okay, yeah, no problem. You'll have a job waiting for you in a year. So during that year, we kept working on this screenplay and trying to finish it and hone it. And he was still working at Letterman. And he at that point had risen from an intern to work in the talent department to being a writer.
Okay.
So he worked with a woman. We finished the screenplay and he worked with a woman. He shared an office in the talent department with a woman who had been there a long time and decided to leave to become a manager. And her only client at that point was, I think, Chris Elliott, who had been on Letterman.
Right.
So she knew that we had this movie because Rob had mentioned. She's like, let me see it when you're done. I'll see if I could do anything with it. So she read it and she sent it out and got us hired to write a movie for 20th Century Fox.
Oh, wow.
A week before I started my law job. And I didn't want to not start the law job because we were a writing team. It was like guild minimum. I thought this may be the only writing job I ever have, and I have a pretty high-paying law job. Let me kind of try to do both and keep both paths open as long as I can. So I did that essentially for 3 years. I practiced law while I was writing the entire time, writing movies for studios.
And you were practicing law out here in LA?
I was in New York.
Oh, you were still in New York.
I was still in New York, and I essentially, the law firm didn't know what I was doing. So I had this double life, where I was treating my law job, this very, prestigious law job, like I was like a bartender gig, writing movies at the same time. And eventually I couldn't keep all the balls up in the air. The law firm said, you know what, we want you to go, we got a great treat for you. We're going to send you back to law school at night to get your master's in tax law. I'm like, that's fantastic. And I didn't tell them I had 2 jobs and I was going to school at night.
Yeah. And you couldn't turn down their offer.
I couldn't tell them.
Wow.
And eventually I couldn't do it anymore. I was getting too much work at the law firm. I had school, screenplays, deadlines. I just finally kind of went into work one day and just kind of said, I no mas.
How'd that go over?
They were like, you know what, this makes so much sense, because we were all like, you seem really smart and you're really good at what you do, but it just didn't feel like your heart was in it. It
Yeah,
felt like,
right.
yeah. So they could tell kind of, and it answered a lot of questions for them. So then I quit and decided to write full time. Panicked that I'd just thrown my entire life away.
Right.
But so we ended up getting, because by the way, that manager
Yeah.
was Lori David. She went on
Oh,
to marry
wow.
Lori Leonard, who went on to marry Larry David and
Right.
divorce Larry David.
Right.
And then produce An Inconvenient Truth as she won an Oscar for that.
But then did she submit you to get, how did you get, your hands on for Dream On?
Oh, for Dream On, I had, eventually what happened was we got a second screenplay deal to write another movie.
Uh-huh.
And she said, by the way, I'm not allowed to negotiate your deal because I'm a manager.
Right.
So I'm going to bring an agent in to negotiate your deal. And we kind of said, well, then I guess maybe we should look for an agent, rather than just have this guy come in and do the deal.
Right.
And I'm not sure we really need a manager and an agent. Back then you didn't.
Right.
We ended up getting an agent at ICM, a
Right.
feature agent. And we then did a couple of other projects. And eventually I started, between drafts of a movie I was writing. Rob, by the way, was at this point a writer at Letterman.
Mhm.
And I had quit my law job. So I was like, well, if he has a day job while we're writing movies at night, I need my own career.
Yeah.
As an individual. So I wrote a movie by myself, gave it to my agent. He shopped it around. I got a lot of meetings and stuff. And then I wrote a spec, just a TV spec on a whim between drafts of this movie because I felt like taking a break from it. And I gave that to my feature agent. He gave it to a TV agent at ICM who loved it and started submitting me around. And I ended up meeting with Kaufman and Crane.
Right.
For a show, not Dream On. They had Dream On, and they had another pilot that was going to series on NBC.
What show was that?
It was a show called The Powers That Be that nobody
Right.
saw. It was with John Forsythe and
Right.
David Hyde Pierce. It had an amazing cast.
Yeah.
So I go to meet with them, and my agent had sent me episodes of Dream On and had sent me the pilot of the show. So they come in and they go, what'd you think of the pilot? I go, yeah, it was pretty good, but I really like Dream On. I'd never seen it before. And I kept talking about Dream On and how much I loved it.
Yeah.
And we had a really good meeting. And then when I get back, my agent calls me and says, just so you know, when you go up for a show and someone says, how'd you like the pilot? And that's the show you're up for.
Yeah.
You loved the pilot and
Yeah.
it's the show you want to work on.
Right.
Because they're not hiring for Dream On right now. And they don't want to hire you on this pilot because you didn't seem interested. I'm like, okay. And then a month later, they were hiring for Dream On and they remembered me and they hired me for that instead. So I did. In fact, I ended up, backing into this job that I much preferred.
And how many years were you on Dream On before they bumped you to, showrunner?
Okay. So I was I went in as staff writer,
Right.
had not worked a day in television really. Andy Gordon was, Andy and Eileen it was their first day.
Right.
A writer named Howard Morris, it was his first day. We were
Right.
all three staff writers. But I had written 5 movies, so I had a pretty good understanding of story structure. And, if you can write a movie, you can write a TV
Right.
episode. So I did the first season as staff writer. The next season, I was a story editor. And then the showrunners left and they needed to find a new showrunner and they couldn't find anyone they liked. And eventually they just said, I think Steven can do it. So I literally went from being my second year, I was a story editor or executive story editor. Maybe I got a bump at the end.
Right.
To showrunner.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So I was like, I didn't know if I was ready at all. I was just like, the only reason to say no would have been out of fear. And I realized worst case scenario, if I completely flame out, then they bring someone in over me and I'm still in the same position.
And then or they fire you, but they get rid of you.
I don't think they would have. I think they probably would have just kept me around because I was the only one who knew the show.
And how many years did you run it for?
I ran for the next 2 seasons, and then the show ended.
And why do you think they left? Why did they leave the show, their own show? They had a deal somewhere?
Kaufman and Crane created the show, ran it for 3 seasons. They were getting paid $1 to do this. They had never done anything. It was insane how little money they were making.
Right.
And they got a deal at Warner Brothers.
Right.
So between season 2 and 3, they had created a show before Friends called Family Album.
Right.
And I went and worked on that between
Okay.
seasons of Friends, between seasons of Dream On. And then I went back to Dream On as the showrunner.
Right.
So the
That's
season,
crazy.
the second season, two other writers who had been producers, Jeff Greenstein and Jeff Strauss, rose to showrunner. Then they left and took a deal at Universal. So there was nobody, because they weren't paying a lot. So people were going to more lucrative jobs.
Right.
So they needed a showrunner, and nobody else had worked on the show. And they were like, we could bring in someone else who doesn't know the show, or we could let Steven try. So
were you, and I mean, you were not intimidated by that? I mean, I know
I was scared shitless.
Right. I mean,
I didn't know, I didn't know what I was doing. I had no idea. I mean, I learned, fortunately, I learned from really good people.
Yeah, but I remember when we worked together on Just Shoot Me, the first 6 episodes, first season, I was useless, and I didn't know what to say. And I would look at you guys, the more senior writers. I'm like, how do they know what to say? How do they know? I mean, I was like so lost. You know,
I think part of it had been that I was a little older than you were. Had already been a lawyer so I was like 30 when I had my staff writer job.
Right.
So maybe I was a little bit more confident, just in general. You were like 25, 23.
I was 26. That's 26, but okay.
So I had gotten my first writing job when I was 26, writing a movie. And I had done a bunch of movies. I understood structure.
Right.
I had like a confidence in that I knew how to tell a story.
Right.
So I guess I kind of, the first day at Dream On, I remember pitching something like where they were telling a story that had a fairly kind of conventional ending where everything worked out really well. And I pitched this subversive twist on it. Where the character, it looks like the character was going to win, and then at the end it all got pulled out from under him, and they were all like, "I think that's better,"
right?
And just because I just not really been around network television and or even any kind of television, so I was pitching kind of a lot of, I don't know, more movie-like ideas, I guess.
That's so interesting because I really remember. Even I remember on Just Shoot Me, you would stand at the board a lot. I remember, to be honest, we often disagree with Levitan, and you made such a compelling case. And you're always at the board. You had immaculate handwriting, and you're always standing at the board breaking the story. And you'd make an argument, and it was so compelling. I'm like, maybe we should be listening to this guy. Like it was dooms. Like if we don't, what's going to happen? Of course, there's many ways you could do it, but at the time, I was like, wow, what's going to happen if we don't do it that way?
It's very funny. I remember the first season of Dream On, Howard Morris, who I love, he's a great guy, very emotional guy, and I was very logical in a lot of ways. And he had written a script, and he had this whole run that he really was in love with. And the script was long, and we needed cuts. And I was like, I think we can cut from here to like 2 pages later. And the story actually, not only would you not miss it, but the story would actually be working better and be more tight. And he was like, "You can't do that. You can't possibly do that. This is the greatest thing that's ever been written." I'm like, "It is really good, but I think we need cuts, and I don't think it's." And one by one, everybody in the room was like, "I think he's right," and he was like losing his mind. He was like,
"Right,
don't listen to him. He's using his logic on you like he's a magician." And we ended up cutting it, and it ended up working better.
Right.
So it's funny that I guess the legal training came in. I guess to some use.
Well, yeah. I mean, but I also remember you saying, I quote you as saying this that I have to get this right. Your worst day as a writer was still better than your best day as a lawyer.
It was probably. I'm not sure that's true anymore.
I believe that.
For a long time, that was true. I would say there have been some dark days, but
what do dark days look like then for you? Like, what is it?
Well, the day your show gets canceled,
right?
There were days. There was one show that canceled where I was like, "Oh, thank God,"
right?
Because I had a deal behind it, and it was like a nightmare, and I hated going there every minute,
right?
And I was like, I had to go into the room and pretend like I got really bad news, everyone. The show's been canceled. But inside, I was like, "This is the best thing that's ever happened to me." There are sometimes when it's so bad, you're like, just end it, just fucking euthanize me.
Right.
So that was, there are days where a show you isn't going badly gets canceled, and then it's kind of heartbreaking.
Do you have a preference? Because you've done a lot. Do you have a preference between working single camera, writing multi-camera?
I prefer single camera.
Why?
I think it comes from my feature writing, career.
Uh-huh.
You know, I like multicam. It was funny. I made such a conversion when I worked on that show, Family Album, with Kaufman and Crane.
Mhm.
We went in, and there was some joke in my script, and it was a good joke, I thought. And we go to the table read, and it doesn't do great at the table. This is my first time I've ever been to a multicam table read ever. First multicam script, and like everyone in the room is kind of like, yeah, I think we maybe want to punch this joke. And David Crane, to his credit, was like, "No, I believe in this joke, and it's a really good, smart joke." So we go to the first run through, it dies. And again, everyone's like, maybe we want to pitch on this. And David's like, no, I really, let's give it one more day. I feel like they didn't do a great job on it. Let's give it one more day. By the third day, it dies again. And same thing. And David's like, let's give it another day. He goes, I think it's rye. I'm like, at this point, I'm completely converted. I'm like, fuck rye. Rye is fucking crickets. We could pitch 20 more jokes. Like, it took me like 3 days to realize that, you can't get away with like clever. You need to get real laughs.
Right.
And I like it, I just like the storytelling in multicam a little bit better.
You like the storytelling multicamera better? No,
in single cam a little bit better. Yeah.
Right.
I also, frankly, I used to think like a perfect job for me would be you write the scripts and then you send them out like magazines. Like you don't actually have to produce them. That was always where
it's never as funny as it is in your head.
Funny. Sometimes it is. It depends on your cast, but other times it's like, the rewriting and the endless rewriting. It's just like, let's just have them read it and let them imagine what it might look like.
That's called a book.
It's called a book. Yeah.
There was an episode, I think it was Jashubi. I'm not sure if you were there then, but I fought with Steve, my partner, about a joke that I wanted in the script. I go, this joke is going to kill. And he's like, this joke is terrible. I'm like, it's going in. It's going in. And we got into blows over it. We put it in the script. We go to the table and the joke just dies. It gets nothing. And then I start laughing hysterically. I was like, how could I have been so wrong and so arrogant? And I'm laughing hysterically. Now everyone's looking at Siebert because they're like, it's his joke. You're laughing at him. And now I'm laughing even more. I'm like, yeah, it's his fucking joke.
There's nothing more humbling than, watching your jokes die on a stage. It's like, after a while, you get used to it. But, the great thing about single cam on Dream On, we'd write it, we'd go out and film it. And like, if no one's laughing, you never know.
You never know, right? But did you
believe in it?
But you did table reads for Dream On, I'm sure, right?
I did not do table reads.
So interesting. How did you get away with that?
They gave no notes. HBO gave no notes. I remember like getting one note one time and being like, I can't work like this. This joke. This is like, I'm not changing this joke. I'm like, and I was like indignant, like a playwright, like Eugene O'Neill had been someone had the temerity to change a stage direction. And then I got to network, and it was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, these are notes.
This is how it works.
When you've done also a lot of kid shows. You get a lot of notes on kid shows, more or less?
Oh my God, yeah, you'd get tons of notes.
More than network.
Oftentimes you get a note. It's like, please take some of these jokes out. It doesn't need to be this funny.
Really? What's the problem with funny?
All right, I can get you the best punch down writers.
Bring them in. But really, they don't want fun. Is that what kind of notes do they give you in these shows?
I did a show. This Sigmund and the Sea Monsters reboot, which was
very scary.
Yeah, for Amazon. And the first thing we turned in, it was very funny, and they were like, "We don't really do this. It's like, we don't want this to be funny, like as nearly as funny as this script is. It's like, just like, don't feel compelled to put like a joke on every page." I'm like, a joke?
Right.
Like you don't want one joke on every page? And they're like, no. If it's like warm and fuzzy and like, they just were afraid like that it was going to feel too Disney or too networky or jokey or whatever,
Because when you look back at, sitcoms from the 60s and 70s, like Family Affair. There weren't a lot of jokes in Family Affair. I mean,
No, I think that's what they were going for. They were going for just kind of like poignant and sort of warm and,
right.
and they didn't want, they felt like jokes would alienate people and be too controversial, or, it was just, they kept referring to their viewers as customers.
Buyers.
They were buyers.
Buyers.
Our buyers and our customers don't really want that. I'm like, okay, all right.
That's so.
Fair enough.
I wonder if that's really how they saw them, as like,
yeah.
What else were they gonna buy?
Yeah, it was.
Oh my God. So, but so did that make the hours easier since you didn't have to punch up?
Doing like a sort of family shows?
Yeah. Because are you getting out earlier?
Yeah, I think so for the most part. I mean, it wasn't, we never phoned it in. We were always trying to do like, and we never wrote down like the shows that I worked on. We made them as funny as we could and as bendy and weird as we could.
Right.
And oftentimes we would get notes saying like, this is too, I think the kids aren't going to get this. We're like, what they don't get, they'll ask their parents or their older siblings. And, like, let's not underestimate the audience. It's like watching Bugs Bunny cartoons. Like, you're going to still laugh and you may not get every level,
right.
So we were kind of writing it for the adults.
So you were able to push back on that?
Yeah. I mean, I guess their recourse was ultimately to cancel you, if you weren't doing what they wanted you to do.
Well, do they have different ways? I mean, they must, different ways of measuring. We haven't done too many streaming shows, but measuring when people are dropping off, what kind of stuff they like, more statistics. Do they share that with you?
No,
never.
I only did. I mean, Amazon was the only streaming show. And they never really wanted this show, I don't think, to begin with. I think it was like inherited from the previous regime or something,
Yeah.
It was like, the whole thing was driven by puppets,
right.
And they were like, we don't really, if we had our druthers, we wouldn't even have the puppets in it. We're like, well, the main character is a puppet. So
right.
You're kind of stuck.
That's so, oh man, that's Hollywood, man.
Yeah.
Now, but you must get more obviously opportunities in the children's worlds.
I don't pursue them. I didn't really want to do it. I basically did it. I only did it because it was a showrunning opportunity, and I didn't want to work on someone else's show at that point. And I also kind of leveraged it into I said I'll do it if I can direct.
Oh, okay.
So I ended up getting in the DGA and directing, a handful of episodes.
And they were single camera.
No, they were multi-cam.
It's so interesting.
Yeah. And it was kind of fun. I mean, I had just sort of aged out of coaching my kids' little league and basketball teams and stuff. Yeah. So they were now had just more or less finished that. So working on a show like that was almost like being a coach,
right?
Or a camp counselor, in a weird way. You'd go to the stage, the kids would be like thrilled to see you. You'd get down on one knee and get eye level with them and give them like a compliment sandwich. Do you know that from coaching?
No, what is that?
A compliment sandwich is basically like in baseball, in Little League, you would get down on a knee and let's say you're doing T-ball. And, in T-ball, what happens invariably is a kid hits the ball to left field and every kid on the field runs to get the ball from every position, or at least a handful of them do. So you get down on the knee and you go, I love your hustle and great enthusiasm, then you put the criticism in the middle.
Right.
And you're like, but, you need to stay where your position is so that everybody has their own spot. And, if the ball's hit to you, the ball, you field it. If the ball's hit to left field, they field it.
Right.
But again, great energy and keep up that enthusiasm. So you put the constructive criticism in between two compliments.
I would think that they would remember the first thing and the last thing they heard.
Well, that's
great job.
We did a joke like that. Where a character on Ant Farm was giving a note to somebody. They were doing like a musical performance or something. And the main character said to this other character, okay, I really like your enthusiasm. Try to hit at least any of the notes if possible, because your singing's not good at all. But again, great energy. And the character goes, thanks. Hey, thanks.
Yeah, that's what I would. But so that's so interesting. And were you dealing with a lot of parents on adult momagers or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah, there was a lot of that. I had, it was fun, but creatively it was like, I'm done with this. I just want to do, I'd rather not work and just write stuff I want to write than
Right.
write on a kid show at this point. Because I
And
also
so,
felt like they weren't really looking for you to do anything smart or that funny. It's changed. I think they're trying to be more creative and more inventive, now. But at the time, it just felt like I don't really feel like doing this anymore. It's just not like, like someone would say, "What are you working on?" I'm like, "It's not important.
it doesn't matter.
Don't worry about it. You're not going to watch it. It's fine.
Well,
It's fine for what it is, but I don't watch it. You're not going to watch it."
So that's it. But now, so when you say working on your own stuff now, so whatever, you'll just write stuff on spec and hope to sell it.
Yeah, I'll pitch stuff. I'll write stuff on spec. I've written a bunch of specs recently where I've tried every possible way to skin a cat in this in this business. I'm like, I'm going to write spec scripts. That way they'll totally see what the show is, and then I would have a Bible behind it to pitch all of these things. And I've had a couple of things where I had studios say, "Let's go out with this, but let's pitch it like you didn't write it."
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm like, well, why would you do that? Because I've got it right here. It's like, and
because they want to put their thumbprints.
They want to put their imprimatur on it. So it's like, the way I put it is, if you give them if you give someone like a fully baked cake, they'll be like, "This is it's a good cake." Like, but I've got this recipe for a cake that's going to be the best cake that's ever been made. And we're going to put in all these different ingredients and make it even better. And then that gets turned in and they're like, "Well, it's a cake."
Yeah.
There's always that like unknown potential of what a pitch is going to be. Whereas a spec, they'll go, "Well, there's this one thing I'm not sure about, or this other thing." And, they want to get involved,
Now, but have you ever sold anything on spec? Because
honestly, I don't think I have.
I know we haven't. We've written a few, and
I have
a
project. I have a project right now that we're going back and forth on negotiations. We're negotiating an option for them to option the script, and they're trying to decide whether we should go out with the script or whether I should reverse engineer the pitch.
Right.
But we have an option. They have an option for a year with a purchase price to buy the script. What would happen is, if we pitch it, they would basically go, "Okay, just wait 3 months and then turn in the script
that
you've already written, because we love the script." But again, it's unclear as to what my feeling is. We should send out the script, because the idea in and of itself is not necessarily that unique. It's the execution of the idea that's unique.
Of course.
And I think that's what got you interested. If I just pitched you this idea, you probably would have said, "Well, I don't know. It seems like there's stuff out there like that."
Right.
But it was my script that got you excited.
Right. I remember early on, I wonder if you still feel this way. I remember on Just Shoot Me, you telling me, "Yeah," because you were ready to leave, move on. You're like, "Yeah, I want to go back to running a show."
Yeah.
And then you did many shows. But do you still feel that way? Do you care so much whether you're running it or you're co-exec?
I've had good experiences and bad experiences doing both. For a while after The Big House, which was, a good experience. My kids were at that point, like, maybe, how old were they? 8 and 6. And I was like, running a show was very all-consuming, and like you never go home. Like, even when you're home, you're like, you've got outlines to read, you've got cuts to watch, you've got the weight of the show on your shoulders at all times. You can't get away from it.
Yeah.
And I was like, I really want to be more present. I want to be able to go to my kids' games. I want to be like, come home and like be able to relax. So I'm like, I want to go on, be someone else's like, consigliere. I'll be the number 2.
Yeah.
I'll go, "Here's what I would do. Do it. Don't do it. Whatever you want." And then go home and be like, I'm done for the day. And I did that for a while. And I think in retrospect, it sort of took me off of the showrunners list for doing that for 3 or 4 years. I think people weren't necessarily, remembering or thinking me necessarily when they were looking for showrunners, because I was all of a sudden now someone's number 2.
Right.
But I don't regret it, because I got to spend the time with my family.
But now, now you want to go back to running? I mean, it is a lot of work.
My kid. Well, right now, honestly, nobody you know me, but anyone under the age of 40 has never
Right.
worked with me and doesn't know who I am.
Right.
So for me to get a job on another show, because it's been a while since I've worked on a show with people who would be young enough to go, oh, we need to work with this guy. He's really smart
Right.
and good and funny. If I'm going to get a job, it's because I'm going to create a show myself and run it, and that's the job I'll have.
Right.
I don't even know if my agent even submits me. I have no idea.
Yeah. Right.
So I'm back to kind of just pitching and writing my own stuff, and if it sells, of course I'll run it.
Right.
So look, they both have their perils. I missed my kind of adolescence as a TV writer. I went from being
Right.
like a second grader to like a college student. I never had that.
Right.
So, I got to go and be on someone else's show, and sometimes it was good and sometimes it was bad. Like I worked in The Big Bang Theory, and it was not fun.
Right. I've heard that from a lot of people.
The most fun place to work. It was a delightful show.
Right.
But it was not. I used to not like going to work every day because I didn't take the tone of the show, the work environment. I mean, the tone of the show. I was fine not dictating the tone of the show.
Right.
But I was not enjoying the tone of the work environment.
Right. I got you. I know what you're saying.
So it was not a good experience. I dreaded going every day. It was a job. It was like I might as well have been a lawyer again.
Hey, it's Michael Jamin. If you like my videos and you want me to email them to you for free, join my watch list. Every Friday, I send out my top 3 videos. These are for writers, actors, creative types. You can unsubscribe whenever you want. I'm not going to spam you, and it's absolutely free. Just go to michaeljamin.com/watchlist.
Yeah. You've had many experiences like that though? Where you're like, pitting your stomach every morning?
Not that many. Once on my own show, just because I had a difficult situation with one of the stars,
right?
Who it's not worth going into, but
at least on the air.
What's that?
At least not on the air.
Not on the air. Yeah. But most shows have been, some are better than others. I worked on a show that it was very dysfunctional, and I've gone into work on shows where where I had a deal where they were like, we need you to go help on this show, and it's kind of in shambles. I'm like, I'll go in and help, but I'm going in between the hours of 10 and 7. And if they start at 5, I'll be there from 5 to 7.
Yeah, but you can make that deal with the studio, but then the minute the showrunner finds out about that,
I made the deal with the showrunner.
Oh, okay.
Because they needed the help, and I was like, I'm not going down this sinkhole. I'm in a deal. I'm doing this. I'm helping out because I want to be a team player.
Right.
But I'm going to help out within the hours that are reasonable hours. And, and it was so dysfunctional. People would show up and play guitars for 4 hours and play ping pong. I'm like, are we going to work or not work? So I'm like, let me know when we're starting and I'll be there.
Yeah, I know. I don't know if that happens so much anymore. I think that's something that's been cleaned up a little bit.
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, some showrunners are not, some creators become, writers become creators are not prepared to be showrunner. They don't know how to manage a business.
That's exactly right.
And it's a different skill set. Being a talented writer and being a manager or a CEO are different skill sets. And some people are lucky enough to have both skills. Some people are good CEOs but not great writers, and they need a better team. And some people are great writers and need someone to help them literally get through the day.
And people don't realize that, because no one goes into comedy writing to become a manager of people. If you have the talent, you eventually you rise to a level where you're expected to all of a sudden be in charge of 150 people. Right. And to show up every day on time. And to try to be responsible and actually, conduct yourself in a way that's professional, and not everyone can do that. And I always, the trickiest thing I think as a showrunner is knowing how far you can push back against a network note or even a difficult actor. Yeah. And what's your thought on that? Well, what I used to do is they never would give me a note. The trick to getting and addressing notes is to get them to realize that
they're being heard, and you'll say, we're not going to figure this out right now together. I hear you. I know exactly what to do. And then go off and change it enough that they feel like you've taken their, at least into consideration, their thoughts into consideration.
Right.
But oftentimes what I would sometimes do is they'd give a note. I'm like, we can do that. But just so you know, here's the ripple effect. If we do that, then this scene here no longer makes sense, because the scene that you really love won't make sense because we've already revealed this information. So this scene doesn't play. And then this scene doesn't work because whatever this and this and this. We can do it, and I'll have to change those scenes, and I'm willing to. But just realize that it's not as simple as making this one change here. There are ripple effects throughout the rest of the script. And they're like, you know what, you're right. That stuff's working great. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
So they don't know, they don't necessarily always see the big picture and understand how pulling one thread can unravel the entire sweater. So I just present it to them and go, would you like me to do that? We can do that. And then they go, no. I'm like, I can look, I hear what you want, and I'll massage it without having to do those things. But I hear what you're saying, and I'll try to adjust it, as best I can without unraveling the whole script.
And then what about working with difficult actors?
That's harder. Because
you can't put the words in their mouth. You can't make them
do it. I mean, I had an actor who literally was he just didn't want, he wanted to take over the show, and he never should have done it. Like they backed up a money truck to get him to do it, and he didn't want to do it, and he did it reluctantly, and wanted it to be his show and not my show.
Right.
So I think tried to get rid of me, and came to table reads with sunglasses on and just looked down the whole time, and which was the best thing that ever happened, because the network saw that he was not doing his job. I was doing my job, but he wasn't doing his.
But they're still going to take his side.
The show went down, but I didn't get they were like, you handled yourself really professionally, and that person didn't.
Are you worried so much about that? Are you worried so much about, protecting your reputation like that within the industry? I mean,
you always have to be a little bit worried. I think, I would probably think that, just given my, I don't know, I guess I understand. I see maybe it's coming from being a lawyer. I can see, if you tell me, like I mentioned, if we should change this joke or this line or this, do we need this? I can sort of see all of the ramifications all at once.
Right.
So sometimes I will, by pointing out the flaws in the note, some executives don't want to hear that.
Right.
They don't want to know. They just want to think that they're right. Or they also want you to basically, I remember in one situation I had a show where they were like, we've got great news. The network wants to do a mini room. I'm like,
great. How's that great news?
How is that good news? I thought the deal was they were either going to pick up the show or not. That's why we went there.
It's great news for us.
They're like, well, why wouldn't you want to delve, into the characters more? And I do, but that's not the deal we negotiated. And now you're basically, I have to do all the same work for 1/10 of the money.
Yeah.
And they didn't want to hear that. So I think sometimes it's just best to be like, and I would also maybe sometimes have a tendency, if somebody is lying blatantly to me, and I say, wait, I don't understand. Yesterday you said X, Y, and Z, but now you're saying A, B, and C. So I'm confused.
Right.
And they just want to go, they don't want to be called out on that.
Right.
So they're like, look, why are you being difficult? I'm like, I'm not, I'm just asking for clarification, because it seems like you're telling me two different things and I don't understand.
Right.
As opposed to just going, okay, I hear you. We'll do it, without any, So I think, I think sometimes you just have to kind of swallow your pride and just eat shit and not speak up about it.
The problem is, like you're saying, I feel like most of those fights are not winnable.
They're not winnable. So there's no point in pointing it out, you know, but sometimes I'm just like, I just don't understand. Just tell me what's going on, and then we can move forward.
Right.
But it's just sometimes they don't even remember what they're spinning, so.
Because I don't think I've ever convinced an executive, studio or network executive, that I was right and they were wrong.
I
don't think I've ever.
I
You
have. It may have been a Pyrrhic victory, but I have.
You know, you were fired shortly afterwards.
No, I mean, it just may be whatever. You're right if you're doing it this way, but in the long run, they just maybe weren't that happy with the general direction. Like I did the show. I did the show where this kid show, and it was about a superhero hospital. And and there were villains and there were heroes and superheroes and supervillains, and we wanted the villains and the heroes to have like distinct personalities and flaws and be funny. You could be a villain and be funny at the same time. Like they're like, look, just have them villains just be scary and don't give them, like, they don't have to be funny. Like, but we're writing a comedy, and eventually like we took a lot of the jokes out, but we didn't want to like deliver a show that we didn't believe in. And then ultimately they were like, we did 2 seasons and they were like, this is not really what we want to do, so they didn't do a 3rd season.
Right.
So you either go down with your ship, and what you do the show you want to do and have it not get picked up for another season, or do a show for 4 seasons that you don't believe in.
Though a lot of people, on social media, they say, well, they don't understand. I think all the writers in Hollywood are terrible, because if all the shows, I'm like, you don't understand how shows are made. It's like,
no.
Sometimes the system is designed to make a show bad, and there's really nothing you can do about it other than
no one's looking to make a show bad. It's just what the creator thinks is good and what the network thinks is good may not be the same thing. There's that famous story about with those guys who did that Steven Weber show called Cursed.
I don't know if I know this story.
Okay, Steven Weber did a show. There was a show starring Steven Weber. It was called Cursed. It was for NBC back in like the 90s. And the premise was Steven Weber is like this kind of womanizing dating machine who goes on this date and like with you shouldn't even say gypsy, I guess. I don't know if it's derogatory, but a woman who puts a spell on it. Like he basically ghosts her or doesn't, call her, or is not nice to her on a date. And turns out she puts a curse on him that he's never going to find love, and his romantic life is going to be a disaster.
Okay.
So they cast Steven Weber. He's super charming and funny. They decide to pick up the show, and they go, "We're picking up the show, but we have one elemental change we'd like to make. It's a small note." They're like, "Okay, what is it?" He goes, "We don't want him to be cursed." They're like, "The show's called Cursed." They're like, well, we can change it. Well, to what? Well, the Steven Weber show.
Okay.
So now
what's
it's just
the premise
about Steven Weber dating.
Oh, okay, but he's not having a hard time dating. He's just
He
he's
is
blessed.
but there's no curse.
There's no curse.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now I did a show called Inside Schwartz, and the whole idea of it was that you're inside the main character's head.
Right.
So the idea is that he, you get to see his internal and hear his internal dialogue.
Right.
With characters he's talking to that only he can see.
All right.
And at one point, about halfway through the series, the president of the network, came to talk to me after a run through and said, "Look, we really like the main character. He's a great actor, but he's like, we want it to be more of like a Michael J. Fox character who like dives into things without thinking." I'm like, well, the character is written is an overthinker, and he's thinking about everything, and we dramatize those in forms of him talking to these people who are, or only he sees. He goes, well, we want him to not be an overthinker. We want him to be like, just to jump into stuff. I'm like, so I'm writing inside Schwartz and you want outside Schwartz.
Right.
And they went, exactly.
Perfect.
I said, all right, I guess but at that point it's like, how do you turn like a aircraft carrier around?
Yeah.
Through, and I'm like, I've got 4 or 5 scripts that are ready to go that are all, hold on.
That's Hollywood.
That are written inside Schwartz, and you want outside Schwartz, and they're like, well, come up with new scripts. You can take an extra week, a hiatus, and change, so we had to basically change course and make an adjustment. And, so it just, because that's just, they think, what if they change their minds? They loved something when they saw it, and then they start to panic that they think it should be this. And they may the next day have a completely different idea, but it's just, that's the idea they woke up with.
Or often it's whatever was a hit over the weekend, that's what they want. Hey, make it more like that movie.
Exactly. So that has ramifications and real life ramifications that you've then got to make work, and that's your job. Your job, unfortunately, sometimes is to try to turn a cat into a monkey. It's just like, all right, that's what I'm going to have to try to do.
And are you able to do this with a good attitude?
I try to. I mean, I think I have a better attitude about it now. I'm just more mature, and it's like, all right, it is what it is. I understand it. Back then, I think I took everything much more personally, and I was like agonized more about it. Now I'm just like, it's coming, and you just have to deal with it or not deal with it or whatever. I've walked away from it. I've walked away from a deal on a show where I was like, I didn't feel right about it.
What do you mean you didn't feel right about it?
I just didn't like, I don't know. I wasn't comfortable ultimately with the people I was going to be working with.
Right.
As I got to know them better, the deal wasn't the greatest deal, and I was like, I don't think this is worth it. I think this is going to be a nightmare. And that's I just good. Said, I just wouldn't, they didn't come up. I just said, you know what? No, I was at the time I was running a different show. So this was like development behind it.
Okay.
So I didn't need the job, but I was like, I see the writing on the wall here. And if you can't meet my numbers, and this is going to be unpleasant, and I can already tell. And
how do you think they took it when you did that? No one likes to hear that.
They were really not happy.
Really.
I said, look, I'm just not comfortable with it, and I just don't. Things had changed. It was an idea that it's not worth going into. It was easier to just say, forget. I'd rather not do it than, go into what I know is going to be a shitstorm.
Right.
Now, not enough money.
The industry has changed so much, even in the past maybe 10 years or so. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on it? What are your thoughts on where it's going?
Look, I'm one of those people who, whenever everyone who's not in the industry says, "Oh, it must be so great now," like all these different streaming networks and to sell shows, I'm like, it's not great. First of all, these places are, you do all of the same work, and you're doing 6 episodes or 8 episodes or 10 episodes. And that's exactly when the curve starts to get, there's a very steep curve, like getting a show off the ground. And then it's like, now I get the show. And now it's sort of like, it's heavy lifting at the beginning, and then it sort of tapers off, and it's always heavy lifting.
Right.
But you start to figure it out. And then you kind of, for the back 9, it's like, it's not as hard, if you stay on top of it and you get stories broken on time. So you're doing all of the heavy lifting without any of the economies of scale.
Yeah.
And you're only getting paid by the episode, and you're working 40 weeks to do 7 episodes or 8 episodes instead of 40 weeks to do 22 episodes.
Okay, so that's interesting, because they make you. That's not the case on many of the shows we're doing. Maybe they're lower budget. They just usually bring you on the writing staff in pre-production, and so then
the showrunners. But you'll as a showrunner, you've got to do. You're there for the 8. Say you're doing 8 episodes. You're going to do 8 weeks of pre-production and writing.
Right.
You're going to do 8 weeks or more of production. Then you're going to do 8 to 10 weeks of post, and you're working 35 weeks to do those 8 episodes. Whereas if you're working on a network show for 22 episodes, you work 40 weeks and you get 22 fees.
Right.
So the writers who come in and do their 6 or 12 weeks get paid for their 8 episodes, and that's it. They work their 8 weeks and they do their 12, their 8 episodes.
Do you feel this affects the quality of writers that you're able to hire now because of, because they have less training?
Yeah, I think so. They're not around production. They don't necessarily understand production as well. It's tricky. I also think that to some extent, I may be alone in this. I think that some of the storytelling and streaming, it feels like a lot of shows feel like someone took a movie and they probably didn't sell this movie, and they said, I got an idea for a series, and it would be a great movie. But what they end up doing is it's like, those chest spreaders, like if you were to have a heart bypass or something.
Yeah.
It's like they put a chest spreader into the screenplay, and they open it up and they jam like 6 episodes of filler in the middle. And the beginning is like the first half of a good movie, and the last 2 episodes are the second half of a pretty good movie, and the middle is just treading water, and you're just like, each episode becomes a chapter in a book. So a lot of writers are not learning how to tell an episode that has a beginning, middle, and end because it's all middle.
Right.
Like
Right.
episode 1 is a beginning, episode 8 is the ending, and everything in the middle is middle.
Right.
Those episodes don't have a beginning, middle, and end. They're picking up from the middle and, ending somewhere else in the middle.
Right.
Like they're moving the ball down the field, but you don't have a kickoff, and you don't, it's not. I think a lot of writers maybe don't know how to tell a complete story anymore because there aren't any freestanding episodes.
How do you think these new writers are breaking in today? It's very different than when we were breaking in. How are they getting in?
I teach a course at UCLA, and they always ask the same question: how do you get an agent? How do you break in? I guess it's not that different, other than the fact that there are maybe fewer barriers to entry.
Right.
Like you want to write a web series and shoot it on your phone, and send it out to a million people. The trick is getting people to see it. But no one's going to read your screenplay. If you're a new writer and you say, "Hey, will you read my script?" and you're in my class, they're like, "Hey, can I send you a new script I just wrote?" I'm like, "No, I'm not going to read that."
Right.
But if they send me, "Hey, I wrote like a 1-minute webisode. Do you want to would you watch it?" I'm like, "Okay." I mean, I could watch a 1-minute episode of something.
Right.
And if it's interesting, then you could go, "That's really kind of interesting." Let's talk about it. So there are ways to get in. I hired a writer on Ant Farm. I was writing it with a guy named Dan Signer, great guy, funny writer. And we were looking for an assistant. So we met this woman, and she came in, and she had no experience as an assistant, but she had just graduated from Harvard like 6 months earlier. But she mentioned she had a Twitter feed, and that she had written a couple of jokes that somehow Maud Apatow had found.
Right.
And she was like 12, and she tweeted it, retweeted it, and then because Judd Apatow followed her and saw the jokes, he started following her and retweeted it.
Right.
And then a lot of his followers started following her. So she's like, all of a sudden I had like 10,000 followers.
Right.
I'm like, so anyway, we finished interviewing her, really liked her. And I'm like, "What's the feed? What's the Twitter feed?" She told me, and I went and I read it, and there were I read the first 10 jokes. 8 of them were like A+ jokes. And I said to Dan, I'm like, let's hire her as our assistant. If we need jokes, we can, she's really good at joke writing. And we're still looking for a last staff writer. And she was our assistant for like a day. I'm like, "Do you have a spec you've written?" She's like, "I wrote a 30 Rock." So I read it, and it was green, but first 5 pages, 5 great jokes.
Right.
So finally, Dan and I were like, "Let's hire her, today, because in 3 years we're gonna be looking for her to hire us, because she was that talented."
Have 3 years passed?
Yeah. She very quickly became very successful.
Oh wow!
And has over like 1 million Twitter followers.
But is she working as a writer?
Yeah, she ended up working on Silicon Valley and Parks and Rec, and she ended up working on like The Simpsons and
so you were right.
The Good Place. Right. Yeah, I mean, she was really talented. It was undeniable.
Right.
But so I always tell writers, if you could write jokes, you'll work till you're 90. To the extent shows like to have jokes anymore, which a lot of them don't.
Right.
I always think about that joke. I don't know if you remember this from the Emmys, maybe like 4 or 5, 6 years ago. Michael Che and Colin Jost hosted the Emmys, and I always tell this to my class. Colin Jost says at the opening monologue, he says, "Tonight we give awards for the best comedies and dramas in television. And for those of you who don't know, a comedy is a drama that's 30 minutes long."
Yeah. Yeah.
There's just so many shows now that are not really that funny.
Right. They ain't going for it. What is this class? What's the class called that you're teaching at UCLA?
It's in the professional program through the school of, the film school. It's writing a half-hour pilot.
So it's a graduate. So they have a graduate program.
It's not a MFA, and it's not undergrad. It's like a professional program where you can apply. It's a 1-year program. You take 3 quarters, 10 weeks each, and you go from basically idea to finished script in 10 weeks.
And it's at UCLA, so it's not UCLA Extension. It's something else.
No, it's not Extension. It's through the School of Television, Film, and Theater.
Wow.
Theater, Film, and Television, I guess it's called. So 8 to 10 people, and you're kind of,
Wow.
I kind of act as the showrunner,
Right.
but I want to hear, get everybody's input. Everyone gets input from each other about their ideas. So it's like a writing class, a writing
They,
group.
they'd be lucky to get in your class for sure.
I tend to give them a lot of, I think, very thorough notes, and hopefully it's helpful. And I
Right.
don't mince words. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm gentle with it. I'll do my notes and then I'll go back and soften them. I'll be like, instead of this, I don't think this is working. I would say, I wonder if some readers might think this is a bit confusing,
Right.
as opposed to this is confusing, or
I
think this is
remember
confusing.
I remember in Just Shoot Me turning to you. I can't remember, it was a script. 1110 was running the show, and I think we had a problem with the scene. I seem to remember you helping us, like, we pulled you aside. Hey, how do you think the scene should work? Because we were lost, and you were very helpful.
Well, I had at that point already run Dream On for several years, and
Yeah.
had some showrunning experience, and look, Steve was a great showrunner,
Yeah.
and he was smart enough and secure enough to know that I will benefit by having other experienced showrunners on working with me, and other very experienced writers, because I may not have the answer all the time. So
I also remember thinking that I don't want to bother the boss. I'll bother someone who's not the boss.
yeah.
Yeah.
But again, it was it was your first job, and
Yeah.
you want to make sure you don't do anything. I've worked on shows where, like, staff writers are told don't even say a word,
Oh, really?
more or less. Like, it's just, you're there to generate jokes on your own, and, like,
Mhm.
just keep quiet.
Right.
Which is, to me, it's like, if I can get a joke from a PA, I'll take it. I don't care where
Right.
the joke comes from. If it helps
Right.
make the script better, if a PA comes in and delivers pizza and goes, it'd be funny, I'm like, that is funny. Yeah,
Right.
I'll put that in.
Right. Yeah. What gets you whatever gets you home earlier. Yeah.
Yeah, and makes the script better, and hopefully makes the script better.
Right.
It's all going to make you look better, as a showrunner.
Yeah. It was. I mean, and you're right. I mean, that show, it was really top heavy. Just Shoot Me was top
Yeah.
heavy, and it was like, that's probably what was so intimidating to me. It was like everyone was so funny, and I remember even turning to Marsh after several weeks. It was like, Marsh, I'm laughing too much. I'm not pitching enough. I'm enjoying myself too much.
Right.
What do I do? Because I'm not here to observe.
I can see how it would be intimidating. I was lucky enough that on my first job, it was Kaufman and Crane were the showrunners. Greenstone and Strauss were like the producer, co-producer, co-exec producer, kind of supervisory producer level. And then we had 3 staff writers who were all pretty new.
Right.
So it was, it felt democratic.
Right.
But you come into a top heavy show and you were the only staff writers.
Yeah, there's Tom Martin. There's Tom Martin.
Oh, Tom,
well.
right, Tom
Yeah.
Martin. So and I know that he was probably a little intimidated at first too. Because it's everyone seems to know and what to do, and it's like, I don't even understand what we're trying.
I don't even understand what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, so it's complicated, but you guys were funny, and you guys figured it out, and you stayed on the show for how many seasons?
We were there 4 seasons.
Okay, yeah. So you grew up on this show.
Yeah, and in many ways,
you get more experienced, and more confident, and then you rise up in the ranks, and
that's kind of like the school that we came out of. It's like you learn how to write a show from basically the first person who you work under, who runs a show. Hopefully, you get there.
I hate to use this metaphor, but it's a little bit like abused children become abusive parents.
Yeah.
If you grow up, or your first show is a show with a dysfunctional environment, you always just, that's how you learn to run a show. Hopefully, I'm never going to do that.
Right.
But my first showrunners were Kaufman and Crane, and they could not have been a better showrunners to model your career after.
Right.
In terms of being kind and smart and funny, and it was like ideal. My dog is like insisting that I do something. I don't know what, feed her or whatever. Can you see her back in the doorway?
I do. Actually, she's staring at you. She's giving you the malocchio, the evil eye.
Working, but so I was fortunate enough to learn from really smart, good, kind, supportive people, and I hope I became all of those things as a result. I mean, I think people are wired. Look, you're a good person. You're going to be a good person as a showrunner.
Right.
If you're a broken person, you're going to be a broken person as a showrunner.
Right.
No matter who you're training, who gave you training.
Yeah, for sure.
And we all know that a lot of writers are not necessarily the most intact.
Yeah, right. I mean, you don't go into comedy writing because, well, you're necessarily, if you're well adjusted, but
Well, some people do, but a lot of people don't, yeah.
Stephen Engel, I want to thank you for taking your time out of your day.
For being such a good interviewer, and
this is helpful for me.
It's only I heard it
20 years ago.
It's always a pleasure to see you and talk to you.
Yeah,
and it was fun.
It was great. Don't go anywhere. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Another great episode. For more information, go to michaeljamin.com. You want to get on my newsletter, sign up for my webinar and all that. And that's it. Until next week, keep writing. Thank you.
This has been an episode of Screenwriters Need to Hear This with Michael Jamin and Phil Hudson. If you'd like to support this podcast, please consider subscribing, leaving a review, and sharing this podcast with someone who needs to hear today's subject. For free daily screenwriting tips, follow Michael on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Michael Jamin Writer. You can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Phil A. Hudson. This episode was produced by Phil Hudson and edited by Dallas Crane. Until next time, keep writing.